All right, thank you for joining the October 4th, 2018 VOLTHA call. We are going over several issues today. We do record the sessions to post them to YouTube, so keep that in mind during presentations and discussion. And with that, our first item we'll talk about today is a code walkthrough for the changes related to VOL 506. And with that, Demetrios, thank you for attending today. I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, hello from my side as well. I hope that you can see my screen.
Yes.
I have just opened the patch set. The main change is part of the flow decomposer file. And okay, let me go through this. In case you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt me. It's small change. Basically, for the multicast case, what we did is that we split the OLT case from the ONU case. For the ONU case, we had made no change. We only changed the OLT case. And here we completely removed this part of the code, which was appending the flow as output. You can see the ingress scope and the ingress port without any check if there are any buckets in this group or not. And we removed moved this addition for the OLT case of the flows inside the for loop for the bucket check. Since we're talking for multiple POMs, we expect to have multiple egress hops, and that's why we're creating the OLT flow based on all the egress hops that are received during this for loop. So this is basically the only change that has been done. And okay, on top of this, we just enhanced, let's say, the function that calculates the hash with one extra parameter using the instruction string in order to make this unique for PON, per PON level. Okay, these are basically the changes. So I don't know if you have any question on this. Nothing. Okay, of course, we modified some of the unit tests accordingly, since there was some unit tests that even in the case that there was no subscriber, there was created an OLT flow for the multicast case. Now with this change, in case there's no subscriber, no OLT flow will be created.
So my question isn't on the change per se. My question is on the change we made to core 1 versus core 2, and how does this change move forward if it's into core 2, core version 2? Did the question make sense?
Is it the core version 2 is with the new way of doing the things?
It's Golang, and so there's many changes.
Okay, so you might want to take this change and port it over there. However, you migrated from the core 1 to core 1 to core 2.
Yeah, the problem with putting changes like this in core 1 right now is it essentially becomes technical debt as core 2 is under current active development.
Yes, but this change was done quite long and it is pending for a while.
Okay, now my sound is back.
Okay.
I think it's okay because I've not started the decomposition in the core at this time, in core 2.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll just take the latest one.
Okay, thank you.
So when you actually do the decomposition for core 2, you'll look at what's in current Python code?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
So just a question. So basically, how do you know it's a multicast flow? Basically, is that with no knowledge of whether it's multicast, or and how do you know that?
How do we know that this is a multicast case? Yeah. Actually, this whole branch on the code is for the multicast on its own. There are some checks. Let me switch. this is the branch that we put our change in.
Dimitris, you can go back to the view of that you're showing the differences. That will be better because the color will be easy. So and then you can do the like show all the codes.
What's the
yeah,
I guess what's the if test where this is the else?
Yeah, keep scrolling up and then you show like the hidden lines as well.
Okay.
Yeah, like that you can.
Okay, this is a branch, but
yeah,
actually I have some
click
connection.
on that skip. Yeah, that's it.
I'm doing, but my network. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so we have more lines hidden here.
So
okay, this is the routine, the decompose flow, and this has a different if and else if statement based on if it is about downstream, upstream, multicast case or not. And our only change affects the branch of the code that deals with multicast case. Let me try and, okay, more lines here.
So I guess how do you know it's multicast? Just that it's downstream only, or is there an attribute that says it's multicast? Or
yeah, there's a series of checks, and it's the last.
Oh. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So first a check for a next table, so it knows it's a double tagged.
Yes.
Then there's a check, I think, for if it has
the output is not none and all this stuff. So the output is none in our case.
oh, okay. So do we distinguish? I mean, so there's potentially broadcast cases as well as multicast cases that are not part of the multicast channel distribution, right? So do we distinguish those from this, or if it's basically not, if it's not anything else that we know about, it's basically multicast? Is that the check?
Yeah, you can, as you can see here, like it's doing the checks. It is already existing code where it says like it's upstream. Yes, and if it is not upstream, then it goes back to the multicast. This change was already there. It's not we change anything on that regards.
Mm-hmm.
Only thing that we did here is populating the bucket rules to create the multiple pawn. As you can see here now, it's going to the downstream. There's no change for that. And then it decides, okay, the port is not none, that's unicast. If it is none, it's back to the multicast.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was already there. Like we don't have to change anything.
Yeah, one way you might want to is on line 733, make that fetch part of the if. So if you get the group flow and it's not none, you know it's multicast then.
Which line you refer to? Line?
Group ID.
We have
the group ID or
733.
This one.
Oh, 733 on the right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. 733 on the right.
Instead of getting the group, then asserting if it's not none, actually make that an if.
Okay, that's fine. What Dimitris, what we have to do is put else there for the group ID, and if the group ID is not none, if it is not none, we should proceed. Otherwise, we know that it's not a multicast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rather than having asset set statement there.
Okay, it makes sense.
We can try that. We can make it and test it. Obviously, you might have to do unit test again on that.
Yeah, unit test, and we'll also test the multicast in our setup. Yeah.
Sure.
And so when this flow is passed down to the device, the OLT, what happens in that case? It basically it goes and grabs a multicast gem port, or is that not part of the?
No, this is not the part of that. This is about the flow decompositions only. The
Okay.
setting up the multicast jump port and multicast jump IWTPs and everything else is the OMCI business, which is outside of this scope of this place, right?
Okay. I mean, is there a multicast VLAN that's set up somewhere, or is that?
Yes, it comes from there, outside somewhere else. We're not touching that part anywhere here. The main goal for this change was to replicate the flows so that in the right way.
So in this case, all multicast channels are all on. Is that?
Yeah, multicast streams basically. Yeah, the flows that we get in the bucket. Previously it was doing for only one. Now we just replicate.
I see.
Have any other questions? Okay. If we don't have any other questions, have you covered everything you needed to review for that, Demetrios?
Yeah, there was nothing. It was rather a small change.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll make a change for the chips comment for the group ID, and then we'll resubmit the patch so somebody can accept it, and that's all.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Demetrius.
Thank
I'll
you.
drop now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Right. Thank you, Demetrius. Niren. Okay. I think we should have my screen back up here now. Can you see the agenda? All right. Then we have two additional topics we had requested for discussion today. One was an ad that was on the agenda yesterday. That was resource management for the Open OLT adapter. And then from our last meeting, we had targeted some discussion also related to a profile overview and discussion on multicast. So Sean, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, the second profile overview discussion was just about profiles, not specifically gas.
Got it. Sorry. All right. So I think there were a number of people involved in this discussion. I'm not sure if anyone has presentation material or if this will just be sort of open dialogue with the group.
Yeah, I put together some slides just kind of summarizing, kind of what we've been talking about, so hopefully make some kind of sense for everybody else.
All right.
So I guess you want to let me present, I guess?
Sure. Are you ready? I'll give you a presentation, right?
Barely. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Julie, sorry I'm late. So the IGMP rebasing has been the one here they did the walk through today?
Yes.
Okay. Any comment from the community?
Right. There was some discussion. Chip had a suggestion, and so they're going to go ahead and make that change in Garrett, and then have that up for review.
Okay. And then since 1.5 is cut, so this will be outside the 1.5 merge, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I see no reason to bring it forward until, I mean, we kind of have a holistic view of multicast, but it's likely it won't be in 1.5 given it's the nature of all the changes that'll probably be needed.
Okay, great.
And Sean Missette, are you ready?
Yeah, you can hand it over to me.
Okay. And you should have presentation rights now.
I'm not quite sharing it. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Wake up, Sean.
Yeah, I go to meetings and not being very cooperative with me. He won't let me share a particular screen. All right, well, I guess
I don't know. Isn't it there's an idiom about, it's the poor something that blames the tools?
like a abuse Sean day, is it?
Hey, when the opportunity presents.
Gosh. Hang on. Okay, so I guess it'll let me share application. Sorry about that. Okay. Does that look like anything?
Let me give it a moment to refresh, see if it pops up. I'm not seeing anything yet.
Doing some really weird, really weird things. Sorry. Like
You want to try to drop and rejoin and see if that restarted.
Did Sean actually submitted that presentation he wants to do on the VOLTHA Discuss? I thought I said something, but okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, well, I sent it out to the people who were just kind of discussing this offline a little bit. But,
Sean Ying, do you have a copy of it?
I thought I saw something, but it was my mistake.
Okay, okay. This is another option, Sean Missette, if you want to get me a copy of it. It may not be faster, but if you want to get me a copy of it and have me bring it up on the screen, I can do that. Oh, here we go. Almost.
yeah. Anything?
I see a very narrow bar with colored pixels. That's about all I can see right now.
Oh, wow.
It flashed up a dual display.
Let me just, I'll email the presentation to you. How about that? No, it's
okay.
really, let me, this is really messing up.
While you're doing that,
I'm just gonna drop and email it to Julie. Okay.
Okay. Are you sending it to my my normal work account or to the VOLTHA Discuss, the Gmail one?
I can send it to VOLTHA Discuss if you like.
Okay. I have that one open at the moment. So.
Sean, while we wait for this, wasn't this whole discussion started when Lynn brought up some points? So why don't we hear him out if he wants to put forward what his observations on the resource manager, because this whole thing came about with some of the things that he pointed out.
Yeah, there are a couple of issues when we're looking for, like the next story for resource manager. What issues do we see that we solve?
Yeah, so I don't want to take this. focus on the specific issue that Lynn raised, because the presentation can get long and winding, and we'll lose the focus of the specific thing that we want to talk about. So if Lynn wants to speak about that, I guess we should let you go. Otherwise, we can go through your presentation.
Yeah, I think we can go through the PDF that from Sean. That'll give a good summary to discuss.
Do you have that, Lynn? My computer is really hosed up right now. I'm have to be.
Yeah,
I've got it up. If you want to give me presentation rights, I can just show it. I have it right here.
That sounds good. Thank you, Matt. Let me make you presenter.
Let me see if I can join the meeting again so I can see the thing.
I have that too. I closed my.
Yeah.
How's that?
So I can see it on Matt's screen now. Thank you.
Okay.
So who wants to talk? Is that Lynn? Do you want to talk first, or?
The first part is added by Sean, right? Regarding the resource, yeah, go ahead.
I'm almost back again. Right. So, the first part is basically this is we're talking in general about the resource manager, and we have a current solution that has been submitted by Girish, which has if you look in the middle of the screen, it says current resource manager implementation. There's the ONU ID range per PON, the LK ID and XGEM ID ranges are per device, right? So we currently run into a problem with the BAL where we're trying to reuse LK IDs per PON, but we weren't allowed to. So we have a ticket into Broadcom to look at that. So hopefully we'll resolve that. But right now, BIP is managing LK IDs and XGEM port IDs per device. Right at the top of the screen is these are the standard ranges that standard support. So there's 30 CPON, the LKD and GEM port and ONUID ranges, and then 98701 is XDS PON and 99.3 is NG-PON2. You'll see that XDS and NG-PON2 are identical basically, and GPON is slightly different. So the issue that we're finding is that if you go to the next screen, actually, just there's a couple of issues. So Telab's brought up the issue. Well, what if we have mixed technologies for OLTs or GPON and say XDS PON? Because the ranges they support are slightly different, then you can't. It's going to be tough to initialize the ranges to be identical for both, although we may be able to find an overlapping range that we can use. But and then from CIG, Lynn brought up the issues about ONUs. So basically, the issue is that for the ONUs, they may not support all the standard ranges that the standards ask for. Right? So an ONU may support a limited range of XGEM port ID values or ALEC ID values, and they may be different from ONU to ONU. And so basically, what's the impact on the resource manager in this case, right? So if you go to the next page, so we had some discussion, some email discussions around this. So the first issue, how does resource manager know the information about hard-coded capability parameters? In this case, there was discussion around, well, we do a mid-sync, right? The mid-sync goes and gets values that the ONU supports. For instance, the maximum number of TCONs that the ONU has, and the maximum number of gems it supports. So, and then another approach would be, well, we could create a profile for the ONU and just list the resources it can support as well. If you go to the next page. And so Chip was basically kind of agreeing with that. And, you know, there may be potentially issues with looking at the MIB attributes. I think, and let me paraphrase for you, Chip, here, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're basically saying that we may want to have a separate profile for ONU type, which lists any, you know, resource constraints that it has. Is that, am I summarizing that right, Chip?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, just trying to keep it simpler and more abstract.
Right. So that was one comment on that, and then and Lynn gave an example of where, you know, there may be issues with different ONUs that are on a particular pond. So if you go to the next screen, I think Lynn kind of lays out his example. So the example Lynn gave here was that if you look at two ONUs that are on a pond, one ONU may support an ONU ID range of 0 to 55, what range of 0 to 55, and a service gemport range of 1024 to 2048. Another might support a different range. So the issue, I mean, some of the issues with that is that can someone go on mute unless they want to say something? So the issue is that, like, I may have two different ONUs from different ONU vendors, right? And they may be slightly incompatible, right? So, you know, my first thought around this is that, well, you know, it's one thing to be incompatible, but does it support the capabilities that operators want on the pond, right? So, I mean, would an ONU that didn't meet those requirements be even utilized on the pond, right? For instance, in the first example, the first ONU has 1,000 gemport IDs, right? So, you know, if you divide that up, you can if you have 256 ONUs, you get basically one service with 4 gemports. That exhausts the number, right? If you have 8 gemports for your service, you can't support that number of ONUs. So some operators may say, okay, my split ratio is going to be always going to be, let's say, 64, one by 64, and in that case, this first ONU can support all those devices for all 16, or however many number of ports you have, for all 16 ports in the case of the edge core, right? So I don't. So the issue is, and maybe I'm just rambling on a little too much here, but the issue I think is that, you know, we don't really want to have more than one pool that's divided up per ONU type that we're going to support on the pond, because now you may be isolating, you know, ranges of ALEC IDs and gemport IDs. So now you can't support a full range of ONUs on all the ports that you're interested in. So I guess the question, I guess, are there any other comments from anybody else or any other issues, I guess, that, you know, besides this gemport XGS type on an OLT at the same time, or the issue that Lynn's bringing up? And Lynn, if I didn't summarize what your example, please chime in and clarify a little bit.
Yeah. You described it very clear. That's a point that if it will be supported to connect multiple ONUs from multiple vendors or types in a single PON port. Should that be supported?
Yeah. I think Shad sent out a picture just the other day showing like how, I don't know how much, like 4 or 5 different ONUs on the same PON port. Was it, Shad? From different vendors.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. So
but they're all Broadcom based, right? They're all
right. Yeah. I think what Lynn is pointing is that if there are ONUs in anyway, the slide that's up there, how do we handle that case? And the ONUs that we have right now are pretty generic, Maple based, or Broadcom based. So they're all pretty similar.
Yeah, I suspect this could be an issue. I have an ONU that I haven't investigated deeply, but it may fall into this category of not supporting an entire range. So it sounds like it's a choice. Either we have some mechanism of dealing with that limitation, or we say if you don't follow the ranges as specified, then you can't be on the PON at all. Is that basically the choices we're looking at?
Or
what? I'm sorry.
Or I mean, okay. I think. Sorry for my ignorance. Shouldn't all these be negotiated based on the OMCI? So are all those information, about, okay, I think you talked about that earlier, but I hate to, force one type of the ONU on the VOLTA, right? We need to be flexible, but at the same time, how the resource manager, is that something when ONU come up will be established, or so I don't know how resource manager can help to resolve this issue. And one other things, potentially, if some ONU come up has a limitation of its own, could that be resolved by they providing their own ONU adapter?
I think what really comes down to is on the OLT PON side, there's a support for a set of ranges, but then different ONUs may support a subset of those ranges. And let's say we have 3 ONUs on the PON and they have support for some common number within those ranges. Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to reconcile that. Somebody might only support 1 through 5, somebody might only support 1 through 3. What do we leave behind in dealing with that? And it's really right. It could be the gym port ranges on one ONU are just reduced by who knows whatever reason, but reduced they are. And whose job is it to kind of reconcile that on the PON level?
Right, and the OLT is the one that owns these resources, right? I mean, if we said, okay, the ONU could select its own, I mean, that doesn't work because they can be overlapping. I think the OLT is the one that owns the TC layer attributes, and the OLT has to be the one that manages those.
So that's I think we are talking about interoperability now.
Yes. So on the one hand, we have standards, right? On the first slide, we listed the ranges that the standards allow for, right? And now on the other hand, we have the operator requirements, right? So the operators may say, I want to mandate this set of values, right? So in that case, there may be a subset of the standard range that we can support. So when given that range could be a common range that all the ONUs that an operator wants to deploy must meet that standard, like the OpenOMCI spec. They have to meet this set of ranges, and the OLT itself then would have to be made aware of that range and only allocate from that range. And it depends, and again, it can be very specific to particular deployments. And if I only have a 64-way split, that gives me more leeway in terms of ONUs I could use with limitations than, say, if I had a 128-way split.
So what you're saying, potentially the resource manager will be the service provider specific.
Potentially.
Is that something the service provider can identify when they deploy this thing? If they have their own definition. By the way, I think the ONU ID, alloc ID, Genport ID, I think service provider probably only care about ONU ID, right? The other ones is hidden behind.
Right.
Well, that's true. But those values provide limits on the number of ONUs and the number of services you can support.
Right. So if I wanted to have high-speed internet service, IPTV, and voice, have those all be different GEM ports for 64 ONUs, if the numbers don't fit for a particular ONU, now we have to reduce or not choose a particular ONU because of that. So it ends up being really based on how you build your service.
Right, but maybe this ONU is like super inexpensive, and I only have a 32-way split, and it works fine for that, right? So
exactly.
But again, right? So those are the business decisions that, assuming the service provider will need to decide, right? So Bjorn, I know you're on call. You can speak up also. If I want to have IPTV multicast, and I'm not assuming this VOLTHA will deploy the H248 voice, and then so it will be high-speed internet, with the PV mapping, right? And so from the same link, I will support. But again, that's AT&T's case again. So please, other service providers, please speak up. How many I will be encountered? That's my question. So
yeah, I think it's
Sean,
not. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, Sean, you're right. I'm in a call, but to be honest, I have to spend some more time to think about that. So it's in general, I can follow you, as you mentioned, that only the ONU ID is an important value for the operator, and all the others are more or less hidden behind. But yeah, I'm not sure if I made all the thoughts necessarily to answer that question right now. So yeah. Give me a bit more time for valuable feedback.
So definitely, but look at okay. So Sean, can you explain what do you mean the current resource management implementation?
So we have submitted a version of a resource manager that behaves as listed there. So basically, it manages ONU IDs on a per PON port basis, and it manages ALOC ID and XGEN port ID on a per device basis. So it's basically a common pool per device for ALOC ID and XGEN port ID. So now, as we look to the future and deployments with, let's say I want 256 ONUs for all 16 PON ports, or however many PON ports there are. Ideally, we'd like to go with an allocation per PON interface, right? Because then we're not going to run out of resources from the OLT's perspective. So
well, I would make a comment, right? So the current resource manager implementation definitely is very, very short term. What I'm saying is, if you look on the if you look on the range, it's not enough to support. If you say ALOC ID per device, right? Is that for the full? You're talking about for the whole OLT? Is that correct?
That's right.
So that so the current implementation, per PON port.
I think the problem here is that there's a mixing of different OLTs may work this as a per PON port allocation or a per, let's say, box allocation, and then certain ONUs have their ranges that they work with as well. And trying to find the common, factor among them all ends up becoming very tedious if the ranges get kind of control. Yeah. So really, it's do we enforce it and say, okay, the specific ranges comply, as per the spec, or there's I guess some sort of kind of one-off mechanism to deal with it when it doesn't match the ranges that are there.
Well, I think the implementations from basically, I would assume almost all, Mac vendors and FPGA providers of OLTs will have some limitations. And this range is just phenomenally large to support in, FPGAs and ASICs and whatever. But so that I suspect that these full ranges will not be supported in terms of the numbers of ALEC IDs, right? Will not be supported by anybody. But you may be select a value from within that range, but the total number of values you have would be, I assume, less than that range. But I mean, the ONU ID is the most critical thing, right? So I mean, everyone has to be able to support that max range, but up to 256 anyway. But for everything else, there may be limitations in terms of the numbers of those resources that are supported on the hardware devices themselves. So I think there's going to have to be some resource manager that limits the total number, which the current model does that, and I think it will go a long way before someone populates a full system with 16 quarters, ports to 128 ONUs, which is probably more of a lab situation. But
yeah,
the idea was we want to expand this by having a new story and a more flexible allocation. I think this ONU resource limit is another dimension, right? That maybe it's a problem that really shouldn't exist, and we don't really need to have a solution for that, because I'm assuming that most ONU vendors would have ONUs that can be deployed in situations where we have 128 ONUs per PON port.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a problem.
Sorry, I just wanted to, Sean, and I don't know how the current resource manager implementation, if you look at that, if I look at that, means it's not, it's not standard compliant, right? I would say, the requirements that we need to meet all these standards, it may, it's not.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a high bar to reach, Sean. I think it's deployment compliant. I mean, it's like it's particularly like edge core compliant. Let's put it that way. So, I mean,
yeah, I wanted to say in the email thread we were going through, I think Sean made the comment that there's the range that it must be within, but it doesn't say it must be inclusive, right? It just needs to be somewhere within there, I think, is the hard requirement. Is that right?
Well, yeah, you have to, in theory, you have to support all these particular values in this range, right?
Okay.
But you may not.
Well, traditionally, the OLT is always
64K. Go ahead.
The OLT is, as we mentioned earlier, owner of allocating these IDs. As long as the IDs are within the range of the standard, it is standards compliant.
Okay. You don't have to support the whole range of standards, as long as you're within the standard range, and then you're standard compliant.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, you don't necessarily have to support 64K gem port IDs.
Oh,
if you're going to allocate an ID, it has to be within that range someplace.
Right, but you don't need to support 64,000 or 64K of them.
Right, so if the ONU gets handed a gem ID 60,000 and says, I can't support that, the OLT says, well, you should, and here's the impasse.
Right. I think from our experience in the Peron, there's a lot of ONT vendors that have such constraints. So, but resource manager is unique in a single OLT device. So how to make the resource manager handle this scenario depends on how OLT get the information of the constraints of OLT and different ONUs. Now there's a no interface. Shad and I discussed it early this week, and Shad has a permit design that can support such scenario automatically instead of manually provisioning resource ID range during each deployment or new ONT activated. Right, Shad?
Yeah, I mean, this was like a quick blackboard discussion when Lynn was here at ONF. And yeah, we can come up with the Lynn. We can come up with a story or this thing about it. I don't think we have the time to go into it over here right now. But the essence of it was that to take into account ONU's specific ranges and to come up with a resource manager that also takes into account ONU specific resources. So which would mean some kind of interfaces into the ONU adapter and things like that. So.
Yeah. This way that there's no need to assign a resource ID range during each deployment. And if when introduce a new ONT, you don't care about the range constraints like that.
I guess at plug-in time, right? I guess when 5 ONUs are plugged in and they all support 1 through X, and then maybe a year later, one that shows up that supports 1 through X minus 10, as long as there's free spots in 1 through X minus 10, it'll work. But if you've already filled it up, then right. Even if there's 10 spots left on the end, you can't use them.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess is it really a problem we have to worry about? I mean, given the capabilities of the ONUs, I mean, if an ONU supports say less than 1,000 Gemport IDs, if these resources are allocated per PON port, I don't really see an issue with that.
Yeah, I think the point is as long as we don't, let's say, artificially spread out resources in a way that leaves any behind. If it's per chassis or box or per PON port, as long as it's kind of allocated on an as-needed basis rather than trying to offset your way and losing large ranges, then I think we could get away with not having to worry about this until we start actually having 10,000, 20,000 gems on a system.
But I think from a standards perspective, right, really all these resources should be allocated on a per PON part support. So you don't really have to worry about it in theory per device, right? The issue we're having right now with the BAL is that we can't use ALEC IDs across PON ports. And I don't know if anyone else is seeing this issue using the BAL, but maybe it's I don't know if it's a bug with Qualcomm or it's a bug with the implementation.
So,
Sean, did Frank confirm that this is not a limitation in BAL? It's not per device, but it's per PON, the ALEC ID.
Well, no, Frank talked about the Maple chip resources, right? Not the BAL itself.
Yeah, I thought I mean, because it was an email exchange between you, Frank, and myself, and I thought he meant that it's not just the Maple but the BAL as well, but and we need to confirm whether it's how we are using BAL that's limiting that we are creating this limitation for ourselves about this alloc ID per device.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we need to, because twice, I mean, you asked and I also asked Frank about this, and he confirmed the same thing again, that this is not a Broadcom limitation. So so I think we need to dig
we have a CSP into Broadcom with a more specific request about the BAL and some logging information. So I mean, right now the resource manager is managing these resources on a per device basis just because we have to right now. But if it turns out to be a bug or some implementation issue, then we can move everything to be on a per port basis. And I think maybe we won't have an issue with ONUs, but but again, I don't think in the long term are there going to be specific OLTs that need to be managed, have these resources managed on a per device pool or not. So I was suggesting that a new story may give you an option of both for each type of TCP layer attribute value. You may want to create a pool per device or a pool per interface. Then if we need to deal with the ONU range limitations, I guess we'll have to add something for that as well, but it's probably not going to be an issue. In my opinion.
As far as the ONU limitations, do we have a concrete example of a limitation, or are we just supposing a potential limitation on the available range that an ONU would support?
We have a theoretical example. I don't know if that is reflective of an actual ONU or not.
Right, and that goes back to the statement of, do we defer making a change until there is a real issue or not? On the OLT side, we know that there are different vendors that support different options, and even the different technologies have different ranges as depicted here. So on the OLT side, there's definitely a need for some additional stories, but my question is, do we have a concrete need for the ONU range limitations? And I haven't heard one, but
shall we? We do have several ONU vendor involved some of these, right? So is there question we can send out to ask those companies who has producing ONUs?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so please remind me again. So if we can do that, right? So, I mean, but again, so but what is first of all, is current resource manager implementation, is that range sufficient? I'm talking about current.
It's sufficient for the near term. If you want to deploy a system with 128 ONUs per 16 ports, then probably we need to have a.
And we do have 20 OLTs, right? Did some OLT have 24 POM ports? Or later on, I think the GPON based will have 32 and 64 white boxes coming out.
Yeah, so I mean, the first issue we need to resolve is the alloc ID per device, right? So that allows you to have 112 ONUs with one service per PON port, if you have 16 PON ports.
But again, right, what about 24 PON ports? I need to do math, I guess.
Well, less. It's less than 212.
But I guess the scenario gets interesting is if you wanted to have a high number of service classes for like 10, 20, 30 different, however many per ONU per PON port, then the numbers start creeping up.
Yeah, but if you want a TR-156 deployment, then instead of having one ALAC ID, you're going to have 4 services.
Sean, real quick, or sorry if I missed this, but are the current resource manager implementation, so the ALAC ID and XGM ranges, were those chosen as such because of the limitations in the edge core and the BAL and all of that?
So the ALAC ID range was selected just because of the number we saw in the BAL, which is 1792 scheduling resources. In theory, it's supposed to be 2K per PON port.
Yeah. Yeah,
but,
right. Okay, so I just think it's really, hopefully if we start down this road, we will make it a very high priority to refactor this, because I don't think it's a very good idea to begin a general resource manager implementation with the being limited and constrained by one particular vendor implementation. I know we've been discussing this for 45 minutes, essentially that, but it seems like we're creating an edge core resource manager is what we're really creating here.
I think,
but I believe the current implementation actually queries the device and lets the device return the range. So it isn't specific to one particular vendor. The ranges that are being initialized from a query from the edge core device. So
that's
different
right.
vendors can return different ranges.
Okay. I'm just reading what's on this. Okay.
What's missing out of the current resource manager are two things. One is the ability to do per device versus per port allocations out of those ranges. And the second one is to have different ranges per port for different technology profiles. If you had an OLT that supports GPON on one port and XGS-PON on another port, that's something that's not supported.
Okay, I was just reading literally off the slide, so I wasn't aware that it was dynamic in nature like that. Thanks.
So I think what Craig just said, I think the most important thing that's missing right now in the current resource manager implementation is the per PON capability for all these resource IDs, especially for the ALOC ID. So Sean, do you think that's something that can be supported moving forward?
It's very easy to do that. I mean, I did that just because we were dealing with edge core only right now. Once the BAL issue is fixed, the code could be changed to support provide resources on a per PON port basis.
I mean, you could build in the capability in the resource manager, and while we go about and try to figure out this BAL issue, but you could build in the capability anyway into the resource manager, so that the API takes in a parameter, whether it's per PON or per device, or maybe you don't care, you just create this resource manager, and it's up to the user to create multiple of those per PON.
So we're actually looking for another resource to implement a new story. We're Girish is working on the technology profiles right now. So we're kind of looking for another resource for maybe from one of the new OLT vendors that could maybe make this more flexible.
Yeah, this is Craig with Telabs. I had already kind of signed myself up to help support some of these new user stories in some of the email threads. So I'm happy to help in both the per device as well as the range, technology, different technologies on different interfaces.
That's great.
Yeah. So ultimately, we wanted to come up with a new story that would satisfy the requirements as we could understand them from the different OLT vendors and I guess ONU vendors as well. But I think for the short term we would have a new story that maybe has, supports these two options. I could create pools for PC layer attributes, either on a per interface basis or on a common device basis per attribute. So I can go ahead and create a story that we could maybe assign to Tell Labs resource, and we could maybe do a little investigation on the ONU IE ranges, whether we think it's going to be a problem if we go per interface. I think if we're per interface, it's not going to be an issue, but maybe it will be. We need to investigate a bit.
So, okay, so do we have the consensus about the content of the new story or the approach? So the reason why I'm asking this, do we want Sean to send out what the new story he's going to create? Do we have, okay, I'm a little bit in the fog right now, but does everybody understand what the new story is about, and does everybody agree that is the right approach?
I personally think it's two stories. One story for per device, per port allocation schemes, and a second story, which is different technology profiles on different ports.
Does that agree with everybody?
Like I said, I didn't quite follow that. What do you mean different technology? You mean one story for technology, one for XGEM, one for GPON? Sorry, one for XGEM.
No, one story that deals with the fact that some devices might require allocation ranges per device for the current limitation of BAL.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And a second story which allows for a vendor to support GPON ranges on one PON port and XGS PON ranges on a second PON port.
Yeah. I think, yeah. So okay, I agree.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
Chip?
Yes.
Does it make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I was having trouble.
Okay. And I think Sean and Shad and then Cui, it's okay too, right, Lynn?
Yes, I'm right.
And then
so I know we're getting over time, but there's one more thing that I'd like to just point out quickly is that with some recent changes, we have the capability now that in OpenOLT you can override some of these functions, which now includes the resource manager. So someone could go in and create their own adapter, which is subclass of the OpenOLT, and override the resource managers to say that I want my own resource manager. So that capability is there, which means that when we design or when we work on or design the resource manager, we don't build in some assumptions that the user is only going to use this resource manager, which means that when you build in technology profiles doesn't assume that things like a resource manager is going to put something in KV store at this particular key location. So I'm assuming that it's going to be there so that I pick it up. So I just want us to be aware of the fact that we have this capability of the OpenOLT. Somebody could go and say, I want an adapter which I want my own resource manager. I'm going to have my own resource manager, and that shouldn't we shouldn't preclude that case. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then Sean, again, can you draft a question we can send out to the ONU vendors and ask them for their limitation, or would it, I wouldn't say limitation, right? But just want to see what the ONU's, the vendor they can support or not. So do you think that's something we also need to do at the same time?
Yeah, it'd be good to know, at least, then we can define the ranges that are going to be most acceptable, I guess, across all the ONUs we're interested in using.
So yeah, I think we should make sure we have the model not just for the edge core or BAL-based OLT, right? So we have actually right now we have a lot of FPGA-based OLT participants right now. So we definitely need to come up with something. Okay. Good discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Sean, did you have a comment?
Okay, I guess we're out of time, right?
We still have 22 minutes because this is our 90-minute day. So I was going to see if you had additional discussion because we had a couple topics for today.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of work around profiles. So right now we have technology profiles, basically for flows. And so I just wondered if there was any interest in having other profiles, like for on interface, for instance, and maybe OLT or ONU equipment that could kind of define some of the things that we were just talking about, like ONU resources, OLT resources, that kind of thing. Or is that not of interest? I mean, I could show. I did a little export of the technology profiles section on the wiki and did some edits to that. I could just show that if people have time. Otherwise, I could potentially just send it out and have comments.
Would you like me to make you presenter?
Sure.
Present. I would actually suggest maybe people do an offline review first.
That's fine. Sure.
And then can you send out an email and then have So Sean, how many profile we have right now?
Well, I give an example of an interface profile for XGS PON and an OLT equipment profile and an ONU equipment profile. So it's to be three more types of profile, I guess.
Sean, we're going to call you the king of the profile.
Please don't.
So
okay.
the new info. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can just send out the file and then just have comments, I guess.
Okay. All right, and then if we need to schedule some discussion time on another call, we can always do that.
Yeah.
So you said you'd send it out in email?
Both to discuss.
Okay.
And by the way, that resource profile, resource manager, right? The resource manager is only part of the technology profile, right? So since we have not implemented technology profile, the resource manager right now is not in the 1.5. Is that correct?
No, it's not right now.
Okay.
Right. So I think if we are deferring this to first review off of VOLTHA Discuss, then we are through our agenda for today. May give you a little bit of time back. So just a reminder, next week on Thursday, we do have a couple items lined up. We had some discussion planned on BBSIM, and then I think also next Thursday, Sean missed that you were looking at doing an updated proposal, including some expanded support for config.
One question. Okay, one question. Oh, Julie, are you done?
Sure.
So Matt, I saw the email from Zach regarding to the 1.5 cut. Has that been resolved, or
I don't know. I mean, this is the image push to Docker Hub. I'm not completely sure. I'm not totally familiar with that process. I know that creating the tag and creating the branch I was able to do, but whether some other process picks that up and proceeds to create the image in Docker Hub correctly, I'm not sure what that process is or if it's fully automated or not. So I'm kind of looking to folks who've done this before to kind of provide some experience or their input. But yeah, I'm not sure what else there is needing to be done from the Garrett tag branch point of view.
Do we have Dave Bembridge on the call? I don't see him. Anybody on the call can take a look at that issue or potential issue? Chad, are you aware about that email floating on the VOLTHA Discuss from Zach and Matt?
I think I am. I didn't pay too much attention to that, but yes. Let me talk with people. Zach is not located in Menlo Park. He works out of a remote office. So yeah, I'll look into that email thread and see what I can help out with.
Teo may be able to help as well. Whenever there have been image production problems to Docker Hub, he seems to have always been able to figure it out. So
okay,
might be asking him to.
Okay. Yeah, I'll also jump in and see what I also don't understand this whole process of how images are generated and are they done automatically or manually. So it'll help. I'll understand as well. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Sean Ying, did you have any other items?
No.
Okay. Then I think we'll start wrapping up for today. We do have, so we talked about next week's calls, and then on the following Tuesday, then we have the discussion will continue on Open OLT adapter, on how to handle v1.5 and 2.0. And Chad had some proposals that he had sent out on VOLTHA Discuss, and then we'll have some more detailed review and discussion on that a week from next Tuesday. Okay, I think that's it for today. Yes.
Next week is the conclude of the Spring 9 or 8. Next week. Okay, is the conclusion of Spring 8. So Ken, is everything going okay? Ken, yes.
Oh, is that question to me?
About the restructure, the Spring 8 development, is everything going okay?
Yeah. It's okay. It's a little bit slower than I expected, but because there's a lot of integration that we're doing among different components, but it's moving along.
Okay. If there's any issue, please let us know.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and then on Tuesday's call, we will be going over Sprint 8 updates. At this point, we don't have any technical discussions that were requested to be added in on Tuesday's call because we keep most of those on the Thursdays. All right, last call for comments before we drop the bridge for today. I'm not hearing anything, so Sean Massette, it sounds like I think you're going to be the one opening those new stories for the resource manager. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, I will look for those, and then of course we'll talk through them briefly with the new issues on Tuesday in our usual agenda approach. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and close the bridge and thank everyone for your time and participation.